So get this right. We are diving deep into uh, dark academia today. But
Yeah.
but there's a twist, right? A real world twist. And honestly, it's a little creepy. We're talking about Tara Taylor, best-selling author.
What does she write?
So dark academia, for
Yeah.
anyone who's maybe not familiar,
Yeah.
often set in like prestigious schools, universities.
Okay.
Lots of mystery, rivalry, and pretty often you'll see a critique of power structures.
And Tara's work.
Oh, totally fits.
Right in there.
From the beginning. But her books, well, they seem to be inspiring some really unsettling things. Her fans are, well, they're acting out. Let's just say that. We've got excerpts from her diary, and let me tell you, it's intense. She's really grappling with the consequences. You know, what happens when your words, when they escape, when they have a life of their own out in the world?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? You have a writer, someone who creates these stories, exploring themes safely, right, through fiction. And then suddenly, it's not safe anymore. Their work, it spills out into the real world, and it becomes, well, dangerous.
Exactly right. And it all started with Tara's, what do you call it, meteoric rise. She became super successful. I mean, really successful.
Blows up online.
The book talk effect. She even bought a place in New York at 32, which, you know, makes her whole internal conflict even more, I don't know, complicated because on one hand, she's got all this wealth now, but she's also advocating for, you know, economic equality.
Exactly. And at first, Tara, she was so grateful for her fans.
Mhm.
She saw them as the reason for her success. But things changed. Some fans, they took her message, you know, the whole eat the rich thing,
Yeah.
way too literally.
Definitely stirred things up.
In the real world, no less.
Yeah, it's not just about the books themselves. It's really about the way they've been, how do I say this, picked up and like run with online.
Especially by those book talk and booktube folks.
No, yeah, huge communities.
Huge impact on young readers today.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, you know, just online anger. You pointed out some serious incidents, like that whole country club thing with the tear gas. And then there's the lacrosse team situation. That was really scary, to be honest. So
Yeah.
how do we even begin to understand this? Like this whole blurring of fiction and reality, especially now, you know, with everything so interconnected.
Well, we have to remember the context, right? This isn't happening in isolation. We have these online book communities, booktube, book talk, you know, they're huge. And they've played a big role in how Tara's work is being amplified.
Went completely viral on, like you said, book talk, booktube,
Yeah, those communities.
huge discussions, debates, people getting really fired up.
I bet.
They're like, I don't know, massive digital book clubs, people of all ages connecting, sharing their thoughts. But you said it yourself, they can become these echo chambers where extreme ideas, even dangerous ones, can take hold.
Exactly. And in Tara's case, her latest book, The Machiavelli Scholars, well, that really threw fuel on the fire.
Ooh, yeah, this is where things get interesting. So this book, it's about class dynamics, but it's told through, you know, Machiavellian tactics. And it seems to have hit a nerve, especially after that ending got leaked online. It went viral big time,
Yeah.
especially among younger fans. And they seem to be the ones really taking the eat the rich message to heart, and not in a good way.
It's like the leak itself became this catalyst, pushing fiction and reality even closer together.
Totally. And you know what's really unsettling? Tara hates the leak. She hates spoilers, period. She's really worried about how it might affect readers, especially the younger ones.
I can understand her concern.
It got away from Tara completely. Her Gen Alpha fans, they got caught up in the hype, the leak, the online frenzy, and they took her eat the rich message to a whole new level. They saw her characters as like role models and their schemes, while those became blueprints for real life.
And that raises a really important question. How much responsibility do creators have? I mean, how much control do we have over how our work is interpreted and how people act on it?
It's a question that haunts Tara. It's all over her diary entries. You can practically feel the fear, the regret. She says, I never wanted my words to incite violence. I wanted to start a conversation, not a war.
The connection between her writing and these extreme actions could be made.
Exactly. And that's a legal gray area that's
Yeah.
worth exploring. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, but there are limits
Of course.
when it comes to incitement.
Right.
So the question becomes,
Yeah.
can Tara's fiction be interpreted as directly inciting violence, even if that wasn't her intention?
And from the diary entries,
Yeah.
it seems like even her lawyers aren't totally sure.
Oh, wow.
It's a waiting game.
So it's just...
It's a constant gnawing fear that any day could bring a subpoena or an indictment.
And that fear is just compounded
Right.
by the publishing house's strategy.
Exactly.
Their advice is, well, surprising,
Surprising is a good word for it.
to say the least.
What do they say?
So the publicists strategy,
Okay.
as revealed in the diary,
All right.
is almost Machiavellian.
Okay. Interesting.
They argue that Tara, being a black woman,
Okay.
wouldn't face much backlash for staying silent,
Oh, wow.
especially with the victims being predominantly white and wealthy.
Oh, so they're really playing
Yeah.
that card.
It's like they're saying that her identity
Right.
shields her from any responsibility for what her readers are doing.
It's a very bold strategy.
It is
With what mildly.
very bold. And they even imply that
Okay.
public opinion would be on her side.
Wow.
They're leveraging
So they're really using these
Yeah.
existing social dynamics.
existing social dynamics of race and class to manage the situation
To manage the situation.
rather than addressing the core issue of the violence itself,
Wow.
which adds a whole other layer of complexity
Oh, yeah, for sure.
to this situation.
It's a tragedy, really, on multiple levels. You have these young people, they're ruining their lives. And the very systems Taro was trying to expose, well, they're being reinforced through this punishment.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The eat the rich message. It was supposed to highlight injustice, and now it's being used to punish the most vulnerable.
It's incredibly ironic, and it shows just how important critical thinking is. Being able to separate art from reality.
So, okay, we've talked about Tara's role in this, but what about these online communities? How much are they shaping how her work is being understood and ultimately how it's being acted on?
Oh, absolutely. They play a huge role. These platforms with their algorithms, they often prioritize engagement over, real analysis. Sensationalism gets clicks. Outrage gets shared, is much more effective than nuance.
So Tara is a victim of her own success, in a way. Her work went viral, but not the way she wanted.
And it brings us back to book talk and booktubes.
They've definitely amplified Tara's message.
But they've also blurred the lines between fiction and reality.
Some of those book talkers, they're celebrating the real-life incidents.
Like it's some kind of twisted game.
It's dangerous, for sure.
It's like they've taken Tara's fictional world and imposed it on the real one.
And Tara's caught in the middle. Instead of meaningful conversations about class, it became fuel for this toxic online culture where the extreme is rewarded. And now she's dealing with the consequences. I mean, the FBI is investigating, right?
Yes, that's right. Another layer of pressure for Tara. You mentioned the potential legal trouble, maybe even a court hearing.
Mhm.
And it's all because of what her fans have done. Imagine that, being held accountable for how other people interpret your work.
It's a terrifying thought. And it points to this bigger issue you talked about, this blurring of fiction and reality. Especially in the age of social media, it's like we're living in this, hyper reality, where it's hard to know what's real anymore, what's staged, what's authentic.
Exactly. And this has a huge impact on how we interact with art, with politics, with each other. When everything's filtered through a screen, it becomes so easy to dehumanize people, especially those who disagree with us. We see them as caricatures, not complex individuals,
That's a good point.
as consumers of art and media.
Yeah, how do our own perceptions
Yeah.
of race, class, and social justice influence our interpretation of creative works?
That's a great point, because the publishing house's strategy, suggesting that Tara's race and the victim's demographics would work in her favor,
Right.
reveals a lot about how these factors can be used to manipulate public opinion.
It's a stark reminder that justice isn't always blind, and that sometimes the court of public opinion is swayed by factors that have nothing to do with the actual events
Right.
or the intent of the creator.
A very scary situation.
It is. Yeah, it's almost like they're suggesting that in the court of public opinion that the victim's wealth and race somehow diminish the severity of the crimes committed against them.
It's a tough
It's a tough thing.
pill to swallow.
It is.
But that's the implication.
Yeah, and it really kind of plays into
Right.
Tara's anxieties about legal action.
Exactly.
I was talking to a friend the other day about all this.
You were talking about Tara's success, right? Buying that place in New York.
Yeah.
It really adds another layer to this whole thing. Her advocating for economic equality. But then you have her own wealth. It makes that eat the rich message, well, kind of complicated.
Yeah, it's like she's wrestling with her own ideas, In her diary, she talks about this tension. Like, she wouldn't want her own family targeted, especially her son, because they're wealthy now.
It's a really vulnerable moment. You highlighted that passage, remember? She writes, "I can't stomach the thought of my son being targeted because of our wealth. It feels hypocritical, but I just want him to be safe." It's powerful, right? She wants systemic change, but she also wants her family to be safe. It shows how complicated this all is.
It's tough, for sure. I mean, she gets the anger, the frustration with the wealthy. But now she's one of them, and she wants to protect her family. It makes me think twice about those slogans, like eat the rich, it's not so black and white. Even when you have good intentions, things can spiral out of control.
Yeah, and that brings us back to those online communities, BookTube, Book Talk, all of them. You mentioned how Tara's starting to resent them. She blames them for amplifying the more extreme interpretations of her work.
Right. She's really frustrated with the whole spoiler culture and how it feeds those extreme interpretations. Especially with the Machiavelli scholars, she writes, it's like they're dissecting my work under a microscope, twisting every sentence, every plot point to fit their own agendas.
But, alongside the fear, the frustration, there's also this sense of responsibility emerging. There's a moral dilemma at play here.
Oh, absolutely.
Tara's diary entries show this deep conflict between wanting to speak out against the violence and feeling pressured to stay silent.
Right, because if she does speak out,
right,
she risks
legal
ramifications and also potentially alienating a portion of her fan base.
Exactly. And the publicist's argument that her silence wouldn't be viewed negatively given the victim's demographics adds another layer of complexity.
It's a tough one for sure.
It really is.
Yeah, it raises questions about how we as a society perceive and react to violence based on the identities of both the victims and the alleged instigator.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is.
On the one hand, you have these heinous acts being committed.
Right.
On the other, you have this calculated PR strategy suggesting that because of the racial and class dynamics involved, Tara can just sit this one out.
It highlights the uncomfortable reality that public perception and legal outcomes are often influenced by factors that have nothing to do with the actual crime.
That's a great point.
And that silence in such situations can be a double-edged sword.
Right, because on the surface, it might seem like the safest option.
Right, especially with lawyers advising caution.
Exactly.
But it can also be interpreted as complicity.
Or worse.
Or worse, indifference towards the suffering of the victim.
And that's the tightrope.
That's the tightrope.
That Tara finds herself walking.
Yeah.
She wants to condemn the violence, but also fears the potential legal and social backlash of speaking out.
But you raised another question. What about our responsibility? As readers, as viewers, as participants in this whole digital thing.
Yeah, that often gets overlooked. We focus on holding creators accountable, but what about our own choices?
It's about recognizing that words have power, and we all have a responsibility to use that power wisely, whether we're writing a book, posting online, or just sharing an article.
The stakes are high. Tara's case shows us that. Fiction and reality are blurring, and our choices, they have real consequences.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with this. How do we ensure that justice is served without stifling artistic expression?
These are complex questions with no easy answers, but they're questions worth pondering.
Yeah.
As we navigate the increasingly blurry lines between fiction reality and the consequences of our words.
And perhaps in considering Tara's dilemma, we might each ask ourselves, where does the responsibility of the creator end and the responsibility of the consumer begin?